All right, good morning, guys. It is Tuesday. All right, we got a special episode today. I got JMart with me, and I also got Clayton with me today. And they're both doing me a favor because we were supposed to record sometime later this afternoon, but at the risk of blabbering for 15 minutes about the Orioles and why the Panthers. I mean, seriously, I have not gotten over. I'm not going to get over that until just ridiculous. So they're both here today, this morning, early to help me with this morning show because we're going to do a college football preview. I'm really excited about it. Clayton's got an interesting profile as somebody that, and the reason we're bringing him on board is not necessarily because he's an aspiring sports bettor, but mainly because he's an aspiring journalist, analyst. He goes to the University of South Carolina, so he has an interesting perspective on specifically South Carolina, but also SEC football. So this podcast will traditionally be by itself as a college football preview. But again, for today, they both were kind enough to get here before class starts, so we don't have to focus on anything negative and get right into it. So, all right, let's do it. Clayton, I guess we'll start with South Carolina, right? How do we figure out this LSU team / this South Carolina team? I'll serve it up to you this way. LSU, I mean, they win last week, but that doesn't really count, right? They play Nicholas State or whatever. Last time we saw them, USC beats them. South Carolina looks terrible against Old Dominion, but they win. And then they're big underdogs last week against Kentucky. They win on the road. So it's a home game. I know you're going to the game. Remove the bias for me. And why don't you start with how South Carolina going to look when they have the ball against LSU?
Yeah, obviously a lot of intention on this game, so it's a pretty exciting topic. South Carolina's offense is it's questionable. We haven't seen anything super promising, but Kentucky did return a lot of starters on defense, so their performance was definitely pretty solid there. The run game is way better than last year, and LSU, they've got a few injuries on the defensive line already, and their defense, I mean, they're letting Nichols State put up 21 points, so they've definitely got some question marks on the defensive end. I think they can definitely hang with LSU on defense, hang with LSU on the offensive side of the ball, but defending LSU's explosive offense is going to be the question mark as to whether they can stay in this game.
So does the game plan revolve for South Carolina, keeping them off the field, dominating on the line of scrimmage? If they win the game, does it have to be 17-14, 2017, or can they win the shootout if it gets to that point?
I definitely think it could be a shootout just because both teams' offenses, I think, match up well against the defensive side. I think South Carolina struggles more with pass defense than they do on the run defense. So Garrett Nussmeier, although it was Nichols State, like we said, he looked very impressive. I don't think it'll necessarily be a shootout. I'm confident in South Carolina's defense to keep it a decently mid-scoring game, but as solid as LSU has looked on that side of the ball, I think it'll be a close game. I wouldn't say a complete shootout, but definitely nothing. I think both teams are scoring more than 20 points here.
How did South Carolina hold Kentucky? What makes it a little different? Is Kentucky just not as dynamic as LSU is going to be on offense?
I don't think so. They lost Ray Davis in the running game. That's pretty big. And Brock Vandegrift just did not look good at all, which was I don't know how that happened. I mean, he's been playing against Georgia defenses in practice for the past couple of years. So for him to go out, have a QBR of literally 1, it was very shocking. So they're going to be tested a lot more on the throwing side. I think South Carolina's defensive line is very impressive. So I'm not too worried about the run defense, but LSU also has one of the best O-lines in the SEC, in my opinion. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Appreciate the thoughts on that. JMart, not to start off on a negative note, but you did have Kentucky to destroy South Carolina last week. It was -8.5. The way I like to do these things, because hell, I had the Panthers to play the Saints, is like when you get a game wrong, completely wrong, would you do it again next week? Like, was there a couple things that just bounced the wrong way? Can you talk yourself out of it? Or was there something you weren't expecting? So before you go, I'll fall on the sword. Like for me, the Panthers, and I don't know why I'm doing this to myself, but anyway, let me just get it out. Like the end of that story is I have no idea how good the Saints are, but I can't bet on the Panthers. So it's just an irresponsible thing for me to do, to try to wish into existence something I haven't seen. I tried to put pieces together. Probably the same way you did with the South Carolina game. But my question is, what was your analysis of that game, considering you were on the wrong side of it?
I was looking at that game, and I was looking at South Carolina to lose the game. I thought Kentucky could come out, score some points, and South Carolina has a passing offense that hasn't really put it all together. They had 100 yards against Old Dominion. I thought if Kentucky builds a lead, South Carolina would have no chance to just come in and take the lead back. And I think Kentucky was going to keep on building it. It was going to be a confidence thing. The issue is they just never got going. Like, Brock Vandagriff came out the gate and was pretty bad, like, the entire game. The reads were off, kept throwing picks, held the ball too long. It was just everything that could have gone wrong for Kentucky on offense fully went wrong. And then I think those miscues led to the defense kind of just locking out, tapping out of the game a little bit. And South Carolina was able to just jump on Kentucky super fast.
So do you see LSU getting up 7-0, 10-0, and then playing out the way you thought it was going to play out last week? Or do you actually think, no, you know what, South Carolina is going to be there the whole game?
The interesting part of this one is South Carolina is at home, and I've been to that stadium. It's big, it's tall. It's not a place you want to be on the road playing against a team that's excited and energized for a game. But LSU, I think, is a team that can handle that kind of pressure, and I think they are able to come in, take a 10-0 lead, force South Carolina to pass the ball a little bit, and then when that passing game kind of falls out of whack again, they're going to be able to keep adding to the lead, most likely, in my opinion.
Clayton, how big of a difference is a noon game at South Carolina versus, the 7:30, 8 o'clock games as far as the crowd's concerned?
Historically speaking, it's definitely a big difference, especially in my experience. The night games, there's just way more excitement surrounding those. But with College game day coming to town,
They are.
I think that puts a lot more attention on this game. So I think we'll definitely have a packed house from kickoff. I think just because of that, it's going to be a lot better of an environment than a typical noon game would be at Williams-Rice.
So one of my gambling rules after last year's LSU debacle against Florida State is never to bet on Brian Kelly. That's my 2 cents for that. Appreciate you guys there, LSU, South Carolina. That is grabbing the headlines. It's hard early in the season to figure out who's good. It's going to be the same thing in the NFL. Usually sometimes in the NFL, it could take 6, 7, 8 weeks to figure out who's good. So even though a team can look terrible early, could just be a matchup thing. Be careful about that. Don't give up on your analysis on a certain team just because they look terrible early. Speaking of which, where are we at with Boston College? Because Florida State's terrible. They just seem like they're not a good team. Missouri is everybody's favorite. Like, I've been consuming more college football over the past 24 hours going into this week, and it seems like Missouri is everybody's darling. I guess, other teams aren't playing as sharp. They're a huge favorite against Boston College. Clayton, do you have thoughts on that game? What type? Start with Missouri for me. Like, where are we with Missouri? How high are you on them? And what makes them go?
I'm pretty high on Missouri, mainly just because of how they exceeded expectations last year. That puts me very high on Eli Drinkwitz specifically. But I was not expecting them at all to be as good as they were last year. So when a team really shocks me like that, they didn't lose a whole lot of production. I think they're around the middle of the SEC for returning production. Obviously, they lost Cody Schrader at running back, but especially on the offensive side of the ball, you have to prepare for the run and the pass game. Obviously, you've got Luther Bird and Brady Cook, very elite duo in the SEC. You just have a lot to prepare for on the defensive side of things, and with them being at home, I think the line at 16.5 is pretty solid. But I'm very high on their offense for sure.
Meaning you don't see it's very competitive as far as the gambling. When I see a line like that, the first question is, can the underdog win the game? Like, is there any chance they play this game 10 times? How many times does Boston College win? Does Missouri win all 10 times?
I'm not as knowledged on Boston College. They'll definitely be hot coming in. I don't think Missouri's home environment creates as much of a difference as some other SEC teams would. But I don't see a lot of scenarios where Boston College wins. When I was looking at that game without even looking at lines or anything, I kind of expected Missouri to win by at least a couple scores. If it was on the road, I could see differently, but I just don't think it'll be that close of a game. I think Boston College is kind of one of those teams that's ranked early in the season because they had a couple of nice wins. The rankings at this point don't mean too much since we haven't seen a whole lot from either team. So
yeah, it's hard to bet against Boston College, JMart, the way they just played against Florida State. Do you have thoughts on this game?
Well, I had a good little run on like a throw me bet on Boston College to win that game against Florida State because the odds were kind of ridiculous. But they're going to Missouri, and Missouri's a proven team at this point this year, and they have a quarterback that can throw the ball down the field consistently and accurately. I think they're going to have a really hard time like keeping him in check. And then you got to go with their offense that's more run heavy out of the quarterback position of Castellanos. It's going to be a tough game to go into Missouri and like actually pull out a win. I think it's even going to be super tough to cover 16.5 against that Missouri team.
Where do you see some of the other value? It's early in the week. What I like to look at for college football, and the reason we record early in the week, to me, there's kind of two ways to look at college football, because during the week, you don't have as much access to the practice. The kids are so young that a lot of random things can happen, if you will. Like, it's not like the NFL where – anyway, my thoughts are I like to look at the lines right away for college football. And then on Saturday, it feels like college football has like a one day in our sports cycle, because then Sunday goes right to the NFL, and Monday you spend most of your time recapping the NFL. College football gets lost a little bit. With that in mind – value-wise, JMart, you get a glance at these lines. They're going to jump. They're going to move. Was there a game that jumped out, a line that jumped out, where you're like, man, that feels like good value early in the week?
I was looking at Georgia, and I believe Georgia's playing Kentucky this week. I think that's the matchup for the weekend. It's 24 right now. South Carolina covered that against Kentucky at Kentucky. Georgia's going to come in. They know the quarterback. They know the system. They know what Brock is looking for. He was there for 3 years. I think they're going to know how to shut him down. They haven't allowed a touchdown yet this season, albeit it was Tennessee Tech and Clemson. I think 24 points of Georgia against like a mid-tier SEC team, it's not much for Georgia to cover. They've proven that they can cover it time and time again. It would take Kentucky really struggling the Georgia offense for that line to really kind of shrink down and look like manageable for Kentucky.
Where are you guys at overall with what you've seen with Alabama/Tennessee the first couple of weeks? Haven't really been tested. Tennessee's going to what? Tennessee kicked the crap out of NC State. Alabama just hasn't been tested. Let's start with Tennessee. How good is Tennessee? Clayton, you have thoughts on Tennessee?
Yeah, I definitely think they've got a super high-powered offense. The only touchdown that NC State scored on them was just kind of a tipped pass into a pick six late in the third quarter. They didn't allow a touchdown on the defensive side of the ball. And obviously where they shine, in my opinion, is really on offense. Iamaleava, very talented young quarterback, and they're running the ball really well. When you think of these Josh Heupel offenses, you think back to the Hendon Hooker teams, you think pass heavy, but running the ball has actually been where they've really succeeded. So they're another one of those teams, kind of got to prepare for either or. Very strong in both aspects of the offensive game. So I'm pretty high on them right now, especially after that performance against a ranked team.
JMart, you take Alabama for me. They're the early noon game. Now, I can't speak for South Carolina or Wisconsin. I've not been to the games, but it will. I am 1,000% sure the environment in Wisconsin will be rocking. That's one of the best home environments. I'm really looking forward to that game. It's noon. They won their first 2 games. Wisconsin did. How good is Alabama? Wisconsin's not predicted to be very good. It's a big number. JMart, what were your thoughts here on Alabama? Remove the Georgia bias here for me.
Well, the thing is, we watched Alabama struggle against USF like last year, so it's not like this is a new thing for them. I think USF has a system that's kind of figured out how to shut down Alabama, at least to a point. I think they ended up just getting tired in the game this weekend. They just didn't have the juice to stay with Alabama. Alabama's probably going to be fine. They're one of those teams that, like, they have so much talent still. They've retained, like, Milroe and a lot of other threats. They're going to be able to find their way through games like this. It might not be pretty sometimes. You might watch it and be like, I don't know how Bama is actually winning this game right now. But there's still so much Saban talent that's still left on these teams that they're going to be able to work their way through a lot of these tests early in the season where you think, oh, they're going to drop. They have to drop one of these games. They can't keep winning these close games. But they're more than able to do it. They've been in close games before. It's going to be ugly, I think, but they're going to get it done most of the time.
Sweet. I know I got probably about good 5-10 minutes left with you guys before you got to roll. What are we looking at? Texas, Michigan. I know Texas doesn't play this week, but Man, and Jack had Texas. It felt like an obvious bet to take Michigan, if you will, just because it's a lot of points. They're home. They're defending champions. You talk yourself into some of the intangibles there. I think we still don't know about Texas. I think we know a lot about Michigan. They're not really dynamic on offense. Clayton, what did you think of the Texas offense? And they're in the SEC now. All these talented teams in the SEC. Glad to have you on board. I don't want you to just keep singing, everybody's praises. They got to face each other at some point. So I'll phrase the Texas question like, where do you think Texas compares to Tennessee and Georgia? Are they right there with them, a notch below? Thoughts on Texas?
Yeah, definitely. I think they have the offensive depth to hang with anyone in the SEC. I have them like kind of right there with Georgia. I think Texas at this point can get the win against Georgia when they meet in the regular season. But if it was at Georgia, it'd probably be a different story. Ewers looked solid. They've still got a lot of talent in the receiving core, but Michigan is just a completely different team. I don't think it was the greatest test, so I'm definitely going to have to see more before I'm totally convinced on them.
You agree, JMart? You got different thoughts?
I agree. I think it's going to be a absolute impossible ask of Georgia to go into Austin, face a team this exciting in Texas, and try and win that game. It's a really tough game to win for any team, and it's going to be tough. And Michigan lost so much talent. They already weren't that dynamic on offense, and then they lose their 2-year quarterback. It's going to be ugly for a while, I think, offensively for them. They're going to need that quarterback replacement really soon.
So we'll do a deeper dive on college football next week when we have a little bit more time, go over some of the more games. This is the first episode that we're going to do, the three of us together. And not to embarrass Clayton, but to his credit, this is his first time he's ever been on camera to do this. JMart just started doing this. I appreciate both of you guys. Heck, you took my mind off the Orioles for at least 15 minutes, so that's good. I'll let you guys go on this note. We didn't cover anything NFL. This is mainly going to be college football, but I'll just kind of leave it open-ended. I'll go with you first, Clayton. One thing that stood out the whole week in the NFL that maybe surprised you. I think the best, if there was maybe not something that you saw coming, go ahead, open-ended.
Yeah, I would say both the Falcons and the Jets offenses not being as high-powered as I thought they would be. They both had about one possession that looked like how I kind of expected them to play for the majority of the game. Kirk Cousins specifically, he just looked really stiff out there. And the Falcons, who are supposed to have a stronger O-line in the league, just could not handle the Steelers' pass rush. I mean, especially by the second half, they were bringing the pressure every snap. So
yeah, that game could have been a hell of a lot uglier if the Steelers' offense – they couldn't do anything either.
I can't even be mad at the Falcons defense for that, but
Cousins
6 field goals. I mean,
yeah, Cousins looked like, man, I'm gonna buy a Michael Penix jersey and just watch him play come October because I got paid. I mean, he looked scared, didn't want to get hit. What about you, JMart? If there's one thing that jumped out at you after week one's finished?
I think the AFC South is going to be a 3-team race for that title. I think it's going to be incredibly fun to watch the Colts, Texans, and Jaguars try and fight for the crown in that division. They all brought really good packages to the game. I know the Colts had a couple plays go their way, a lot of big plays against the Texans, but still they hung in that game. They stayed in that game until the end of the game. And the Jaguars handled business early on. I think it's a division that could literally go to any of the 3 teams involved.
Great. I will say that I'm really looking forward to Thursday's game. The Dolphins showed me a lot by winning that game. It's not the type of game that they typically win at home. They want to score a bunch of points. They couldn't score. Jaguars, to your point, JMart, they were really impressive. They just couldn't close that game out. And that's why I'm not as high on them this year to make the playoffs. I think they fall short because they have a hard time closing out these games. But I'm really looking forward to Thursday night, Buffalo at Miami. Josh Allen is just, outside of Lamar and I guess Mahomes, but even more than Mahomes, it's just like must-see TV with Josh Allen. Every time he drops back, something fun's going to happen. So, all right, appreciate you guys being here. We will see you next week. Do a little bit longer on college football because it's going to keep evolving. But we'll primarily focus when Clayton's on board here with the SEC. So, Clayton, thank you in particular very much. JMart, appreciate you as always. Have a good day, guys. And for everybody listening, positive thoughts, positive mood going into tomorrow. Gonna have a positive week is really the last time I'm gonna say this, but I just hate what happened last week. It's just not how I wanted to start. But don't lose faith. Everything's gonna work out. We'll get better. No more Panthers bets. At least that's my number one rule after last week. All right, and no more talking about the Panthers. Thank you guys for the free therapy session. Take care. I'll see you guys later.
All right, appreciate it.
See you.